founder and content lead at City Greenhouse. Today, we're here to talk about a very relevant subject for a lot of our clients, and really a subspecialty that we've really developed here at City Greenhouse. It's about considerations that newly formed commercial organizations or startup biotech and pharma companies need to consider when selecting an advertising agency for the first time. A lot of times these organizations are transitioning for the first time from an R&D organization into a commercial organization, and really having to build out not just the internal infrastructure of their commercial organization, but also starting to partner with outside vendors and agencies that are really going to help propel their first or second or their new compound or agent into the marketplace for the first time. And it involves a mind shift both for the organization itself, but it also it necessitates an agency with a certain kind of mindset to really help organizations through those phases. So today we have with us two of our senior most account leads at the agency. We have Renee Wills, who's my co-founder and head of client services at City Greenhouse, and Senior Vice President Client Lead Renée Green, both of which, all three of us of which actually have a lot of experience in helping clients navigate that really, really crucial, important time in their transition from, changing from an R&D organization into a commercial organization and launching their first product. So with that context in mind, Renée Green, since we have two Renees, we have like kind of parallel Renees going on here today. Renee in stereo. Renée Green, tell us what are like some of the first considerations do you think that a newly formed commercial organization needs to have when selecting an agency?
Yeah, it's a great question, Fred. I think one of the initial things out of the gate is just ensuring that the agency really understands who your audiences are. Because based upon this time frame that the organization is in, oftentimes we're expanding beyond the traditional HCP, right, consideration set. We're thinking about groups like the investor community, because it's not just about preparing to launch the brand, but you're also launching the company in many instances. And sometimes you have the luxury of doing those things sequentially. Sometimes they have to happen in parallel. And so it's making sure that the agency understands how to really work against both of those business objectives and really help the organization achieve that.
Yeah, I think that's a really crucial point, because when you're working with like an an established pharma company that's got franchises and portfolios of drugs, as an agency, you're really just focused on like, okay, who's the audience for this particular drug? What are the market drivers and barriers in that particular market space? What's the competition in that particular market space? But for a newly commercial organization or an organization commercializing for the first time, you're right. It's the investment community. It's KOL communities if there's still ongoing clinical trial work going on. It's also making your startup company or your biotech company look really attractive to potential staff, to make sure that they want to come work for a really legitimate going concern, so that they're taking the risk of leaving maybe the relative safety of a big pharma company or a big biotech company and launching or changing their career into a smaller, perhaps more risky biotech environment, that you're really appealing to them and they feel like they're making a wise move in their career as well. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you about that.
I when I think about that, another thing that comes to mind about these startups is the fact that they're startups, which means they're building that plane as they fly it. They have to add people. They add their chief commercial officer. I remember when we worked with one of our very memorable clients, it was just the chief commercial officer sitting in a room with a group of us saying, okay, let's start. He had no one. And so you need, when you think about an agency partner, or when you think about commercializing, you need partners who kind of get what it's like, who are lean, who are agile, who can work with senior management. Often a lot of the meetings that we have with the startup community and these companies is sitting with, folks who are on the highest level of their organization because they haven't built out a commercial organization yet. And the agency needs to be able to, onboard folks and bring them along the journey. And that's a very, it's a high maintenance kind of thing because you need to keep your eye on, as that organization is scaling, bringing in people, onboarding people, making sure that they know where things are going. At the same time, the agency would be scaling with you. And so I guess as you're thinking about an agency partner to go on this journey and evaluating whether a good fit, have they done that before? Is there a track record of understanding how your organization works and how startups work, and a track record, importantly, of scaling alongside you in parallel?
I agree with that, Renee. And I think one of the important things about how the agency scales is ensuring that they have a core base of talent that is going to be consistent right across that business as it grows, so that you're not losing that history and that historical knowledge as you build the brand and as you build the business. You want to be sure that those folks are along for the ride and that you're building staff around them to further support the business.
So just to distill down like maybe some salient points for marketers on that is you want an agency partner where you're going to get significant, at least a seniority of a level that's really going to be able to meet effectively with some C-suite people in these early stages. I mean, you're not dealing with more junior marketers in that situation. You really are. It's not uncommon to be dealing with like the CEO, the CMO, the CCO in these meetings in some of these early, early times in the company's development. So you want to make sure that your agency has the seniority to really match up with that and be able to effectively meet and drive that forward. And then you want an agency that can then still retain those people and build out a team as you, as a chief marketing officer, chief commercial officer, really starts to build out your team as well, so that you can then start to build up under that. So as the organization grows, you're growing as well. An agency that is going to grow with you as you grow your marketing arm.
So true. And I think the idea of growing with you and inherent in all of this is a sense of flexibility, because there's a certain startups don't necessarily know. They're inventing the process as they go, and they have to, and senior management will come and weigh in perhaps more frequently because there's a lot they have, this is their baby, and they want to make sure that they get it off to the right start. The the product has to be successful for this whole organization to be successful. So there's so much pressure on that. And so because there's certain things that happen along the way, and because they're inventing a process, because there are people that are thrown together for the first time and have to figure out how to work together, the agency needs to be really flexible. And it can't take this approach of, well, this is our process and we're going to apply this to your organization. Yes, the agency needs to have a good process, but yes, it needs to pivot. It needs to listen. It needs to suggest solutions. It needs to also suggest things that are efficient rather than putting this multi-stage process in the way. You just need the right amount of process so that you get things right and you get things on time and you get great work.
So to that point, and I mean, you kind of touched on it in a peripheral kind of way, but like, the cash runway, I mean, these organizations at this point in time are non-revenue generating. The cash runway and preserving as much of that cash runway is vital. Renée Green, tell us a little bit about like what are some of the ways that agencies, or really good agencies for startups, can really help not just understand that marketers in these new startups have a finite cash runway, but how do agencies go about respecting that and really owning that responsibility themselves?
Yeah, I think a good agency partner is going to be one that's very prudent with your budget, right? Understanding that oftentimes funding is going to be gated based upon certain milestones, right? And being able to plan around that, not just being in the relationship for the sake of trying to drive as much revenue as possible, but really, living and breathing that business as our marketers do, and spending the funding as if it were our own, helping our marketers, make choices about what's necessary in the early phases versus what's a nice to have that we might be able to tack on in a phase 2 as additional funding becomes available. So it's really looking at that whole runway, from pre-launch to launch, post-launch, and making choiceful decisions about what's going to be most impactful to move the business. And again, what are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves, and just having that transparent conversation, being a partner, with our clients.
Just to dovetail on that a little bit is like, some of the things that we've seen is that is really kind of understanding what an internal level of rigor and validation means to that particular organization. If we were working with a really large pharmaceutical company, we would expect rounds of qual for a particular project or creative effort, and potentially even some rounds of quant on top of that. Whereas a startup, it might just mean reaching out to a few KOLs or reaching out to a few friends in the industry to get their advice. I think it's really important to kind of make sure that your agency is listening to what, rather like Renee Wills mentioned earlier, really listening carefully to the level of rigor that you as a marketer needs, and really being respectful of that, and making sure that you're just matching up the level, the process, the effort to that, so that they get enough, the marketers get enough information to make an educated decision based on what the internal dynamics of that particular company are. So based on that, and I'll open this question up to either one of you. Maybe we'll go Renee Wills first and then Renée Green. But tell us a little bit about like what, because there's a range of agencies out there, from very small boutique agencies up to big giant holding company agencies. What are some of like the pros and cons of engaging with those different size agencies? Like Renee Wills, tell us a little about like what do you think are some of the trade-offs that may occur if a startup biotech goes with a smaller agency versus a large holding company agency to launch their first product?
This feels like a Goldilocks and the Three Bears question to me, Fred. It's kind of like
might
you need to
be.
get it just right,
Well,
right? Well, the large agency, they have all these different resources, but on the other hand, they have a lot of fixed processes. They have hourly rates. They want to do things a certain way. So they give you access to a whole range on the positive side of, different capabilities and things like that. And they can bring in different partners. However, there's a certain rigidity that comes with that. And there's a certain price tag that comes with the big agencies as well. And so, and they also have shareholders that they're responsible to. So you have to kind of question sometimes whether or not that their goals are aligned with your organization's goals, because they're trying to maximize billable hours and report to their shareholders. So there's there's some things. On the other hand, big agencies suit some clients very well. But if you're a small startup, you may struggle to get the senior level attention because you may not have that budget that like commands that A team from the big agency. So when you take that all into consideration, you're like, well, I don't know, maybe I should look at a smaller agency. But if you go too small, you're going to end up with a shop, and they'll be cheap, but you're not going to get the strategy. You're not going to get the services. And so what you want is somewhere in the middle, and it depends on the organization and budget and your network and all that kind of stuff. But, something in the middle has a network of resources, and you should make sure that any agency that you pull in has some established partnerships and things like that. So maybe they don't do media, or maybe they don't do, I don't know, dev in-house, but they should have a range of partners they're very comfortable with. They should take into consideration that all the things that we've talked about before, but importantly, they should be staffed with senior level folks who've been there, done that, been on a lot of launches, and get startups. So I guess my vote would be, if I were a marketing director, and that's something that I used to do in my past life, is that I think that the smaller to mid-size agency range can be an ideal sweet spot for startups, and especially you need to find an agency that has the experience in this space and is a good cultural fit. I can't ever emphasize enough chemistry and culture as well. And does that fit with your organization? I don't know, Renee Green, did you have anything else to add to that one?
No, you covered all the bases on that one.
Uh-oh, I took everything.
So then let me pass this off to you, Renee Green. So like, you and I have, especially in some of the more recent history of City Greenhouse, have worked on with numerous startup clients who are commercializing for the first time. What do you think are some of the unique challenges that a client or a marketer would need to make sure that their agency can address in some of the day-to-day operations? But besides budget, in making sure that a marketer is picking the right agency to help them face some of the challenges that they might encounter on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think just harkening back to something that we talked about previously, a lot of times with these startup organizations, they have very lean teams, where executive management is very involved in a lot of the decision making that's happening in those early stages because it's so critical to the success of not only the brand but the company. And so making sure that an agency is prepared to help you build those business cases, right? Engaged with you in lockstep to really help support some of the key decisions that need to be made along the way. Because oftentimes that helps just to drive efficiency, and I think having the agency on board with you through those processes is very, very critical.
Yeah, one of the other things I think that is a really interesting challenge of an organization that's commercializing for the first time is a lot of times the senior leadership that formed the pharma company may or may not have come from a marketing background. I mean, we have worked at City Greenhouse, we've worked with some clients where the CEO is actually from a marketing background and understands what we're trying to accomplish and understands the kind of steps in some of the journeys we're taking them on in terms of positioning a product or disease state education or positioning, brand personality, things like that. But then there's other times where we have other clients in the mix where the CEO of this fledgling pharmaceutical company may have come from a hedge fund background or may have come from a clinical background and may not have a full understanding of all of the elements of what is required for a marketing mix. And one of the things we've seen in our collective experience here at BCG is like we also spend a lot of time in helping our the newly minted marketing team make business cases for particular spend levels up to an upper management that may not fully understand the dollars or the amount of resources that are required to commercialize well a product, in a new space. Because I mean, again, you're like we mentioned before, you're not just launching a brand, you're launching a company as well in a lot of cases to outside of the investor community into a day-to-day clinician audience, and you want to make sure that you're able to reach all of those individuals and appeal all those individuals well. And to help out with that, we end up a lot of times not just proposing tactics and proposing work streams, but also adding a lot of wraparound around that so that when those get passed up to the C-suite level of people who may not understand the exact flow of marketing initiatives and how those marketing initiatives work and unfold, that there's solid rationale for why these things need to take place and how those will tie back into ROI for the organization when they actually launch the product. We've done some actually very concrete work with some of our clients in that way of helping them prepare kind of like very detailed cases on companies that did not spend appropriately and had disastrous launches versus companies that did spend appropriately, and again, doesn't have to be excessively, but did spend appropriately in the right ways and prudently and ended up having successful first launches in the space. So I think that's another really key barrier to focus on.
And it's interesting too, Fred, you talk about the marketing mix. I think that another key component of the right agency partner is one that's going to help that, marketer think holistically about the business, right? Not an agency that's just going to come to the table with tactics that serve them from a revenue stream perspective, but really helping, again, usually it's party of one, right? From a commercial perspective, how do we help those marketers really think from a 360 perspective about what it's going to take to get this brand to launch, even if it's something that doesn't drive revenue for the agency at the end of the day, but it's the right thing for the brand. And so you want agency partners who really think like that.
Even on top of that, like talking marketers out of spending money that you feel is not a good use of their dollars, and directing them in ways, and the cost efficiencies in ways that they could be saving money to use for other things. Again, you're totally your point, that may not benefit the agency directly, but a open and honest relationship like that, a trusting relationship like that, would benefits the agency long term overall. So if your agency is operating like that, if you feel like they're acting in your best interest, that's a good partnership to have and to maintain, and to keep in the fold as you're moving through that process. So with that, last thoughts that you guys might have, any other kind of like parting pearls of wisdom that you would want to impart onto our marketer audience out there?
Go with your gut. You got to find an agency partner that's in it with you, that has the passion and hunger, and that energy and the questions. Like, this is not a space where you can just go and act like an Autobot. You need to think, you need to ask smart questions, and you need to be able to push. And then if you don't know something, like, we go figure it out together. That's the kind of agency that you want along this journey.
Renée Green?
I would echo that, and the only thing I would add is just chemistry, right? I mean, it's typically, sometimes it can be a long road to launch, sometimes it can be a very expedited road, but we're going to be spending a lot of hours together, right, between the agency and the client. And so making sure that you have that strong chemistry, the rapport, the ability to have transparent and honest conversations, right, to be able to make the best decisions for the brand.
Yeah, I think just to add a little bit to that, on top of that, is just make sure you also, I mean, a lot of marketers are brought in from the outside from other companies. Some of our clients have brought in marketers from some of the bigger organizations out there into this smaller environment, and really make sure that as a marketer, you really appreciate and understand the culture that you're now in, as opposed to the culture that you came from, and really do your best to find an agency partner that you feel like is going to effectively work within the culture that you have arrived in, not necessarily the way you had previously done it in your past lives, because that can create a lot of tension among some of like the old guard in these startups, who some of those people have been around for years getting the organization to this point, and they have an entrenched way of being. Making sure that your agency partner can really understand and appreciate that and work with that, and also achieve what your marketing objectives and goals are as well. So great. So with that, we'll sign off. Thank you guys for your time. We really appreciate you tuning in to us, and look forward to more episodes of Thoughts from the Greenhouse. I'm Fred Kinch again, and I'm here with some of my favorite people on the planet, Renée Green, SVP of Client Services at City Greenhouse, and Renee Wills, a co-founder of mine at City Greenhouse. We thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your day, and tune back in later for more useful tips for marketers as they navigate their agency relationships.